Hello everyone, my name is Sai and today I'm going to be talking about the methyl-isocyanate or MIC exposure in Bhopal, India. This incident is considered to be the world's worst industrial disasters. The purpose of this presentation is to talk about the brief history of the Bhopal gas leak, MIC background and why it is considered toxic, safety and hazards of UCIL, which is the United Carbide India Limited Manufacturing Company, and the cause of the gas leak, health consequences, and the aftermath of the incident. Here we have the table of contents. You can pause the slide here if you want to look at what we'll be talking about and the different figures that you should be focusing on. Timeline of events. In 1970, Union Carbide India Limited built the plant. The site in Bhopal was labeled as light industrial and commercial use and classified as not hazardous. This is a point to note because the nearby residents were not aware of what was really happening in the UCIL plant and what chemicals were being harbored there, so they weren't given any safety measures or in case of emergency notice, so it was an unknown risk for them. In 1984, the plant began manufacturing 7, which is pesticides, and 7 is a commercial name for carbol, which is a really toxic chemical, and it was being manufactured at excess levels. So there were plans to dismantle the plant, and this was because there was a decreased demand for pesticides, and this was also a bad time for farmers in the 1980s because of crop failures and famines. So they were thinking about, okay, why don't we sell the plant? So July 1984, they were like, the plant is up for sale, but there were no buyers, and that's when they decided, okay, we're going to dismantle. But during that process, they kind of neglected that even though the plant might not have been useful, that it still contains some harmful chemicals and it needs to be maintained in a certain way and certain procedures still need to be followed. So due to that negligence, on December 2nd, 1984, a leak of MIC was observed along with increased tank pressure, and this was due to a faulty valve that led a leak allowing water to mix with 40 tons of MIC, which was later released into the air. We're going to talk more about this when we talk about what MIC is. But this was basically a summary of what's happened, or the details we were given to talk about how this might have unfolded. So what was the purpose of MIC in the manufacturing plant? So this here is a chemical reaction that takes place for the formation of carbol, which we talked about is a major component for pesticides, and it's also very, very toxic. So it takes 1-naphthenol to react with methyl-isocyanate to give us the carbol. So that's why there was so much MIC on that plant to begin with. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the isocyanate family, which is what MIC is a part of. So it's a family of highly reactive chemicals commonly used in the manufacturing field, such as in like fibers, coatings such as paint, automobile industry, building insulation materials. MIC is a member of this family and is recognized to be extremely toxic to humans. It's very volatile. To continue more on characteristics of MIC, ways of exposure, inhalation, or dermal absorption, toxicity can develop within 1 to 4 hours. Symptoms include cough, chest pain, lacrimation, eyelid edema, and unconsciousness. Progression of symptoms between 24 to 48 hours can result in acute lung injury, cardiac arrest, and death. When MIC reacts with water, it gives off heat, producing methylene and carbon dioxide, both of which are toxic when inhaled, ingested, or exposed to skin. So this is what happened in the tanks. Here we have the inhalation exposure data, which was presented by the EPA. I thought this was interesting because here it's basically talking about the amount of MIC concentration to which most individuals can be exposed to without adverse effects. So there's the regulatory advisory numbers and the health numbers, and it's taking different types of studies that kind of try to outline what amount is okay and what is the outcome of inhaling certain amounts of MIC. Next, we're going to be talking about plant hazard and risks. So like what went wrong with the UCIL site? So lack of personnel on-site maintenance procedure, poor lab safety procedures, pipe washing was not done correctly, MIC tanks were not well maintained, and no on-site emergency plan, lack of infrastructure and proper management, and lastly, plant was located in a popular area, and no measure of hazard chemicals or attempts to inform local population was done. This is a very interesting diagram because it talks about the possibilities of preventing the gas leak, and if these measures were taken, maybe they would have prevented the gas leak from happening in the first place. So let's go through this diagram. So we have our vent gas scrubber. Leaking gas could have been detoxified, but the scrubber was turned off. We have the flare tower designed to burn off gas, but connecting pipe had been removed for maintenance. Water curtain not high enough to reach gas. So these are the MIC storage tanks, the E610, E611, and E619. And then the refrigeration system, the Freon system was to cool liquid MIC, was shut down in June 1984 to save money. So maybe if that was on, it could have reduced the heat. So these were all different components that could have played a role in preventing this gas leak and this massive disaster. So here is the picture of, I guess, the nearby areas, and you can see the site standing up tall right there, and all like this gas and smoke kind of taking over that area. The nearby houses over here, it seems to be like a slum area from what I'm seeing. And that's really interesting to consider, because with such an effect like this, current health conditions are also something to think about, and how this can worsen and the people that might be most affected. So a lot of things to think about in terms of health and SES. So figure 5 talks about health outcomes. Exposed, estimated 100,000 to 200,000 people. Doctors were not familiar with MIC poisoning initially, poor health information. Reported deaths 2,500, however that's probably an underestimate, and that was reported by the APHA. Stillbirth rate has increased to 300%, neonatal mortality has increased to 200%. The Chagari Children's Center in Bhopal reported over 1,000 cases of neurological conditions, such as cerebral palsy, autism, and other intellectual disabilities. Aftermath, air quality. I wasn't able to find air quality reports closer to the gas leak, but I was able to find the recent reports, which is on a daily basis, which I still think is beneficial, because we can see if there has been any improvement or in that specific environment. But according to the air pollution map, the air is still unhealthy, and there is still high levels of PM 2.5 as well as SO2. So we can say that the Bhopal gas leak was just the beginning, and there's still like the effects of it still stand to this day, and it's still toxic for the residents that are currently living there. Aftermath, is Bhopal still toxic? So the purpose of this slide is to basically think about if there's a possibility of maybe redoing the UCIL site in terms of building something else or cleaning up that environment and having something in place that might be beneficial for the residents, or is there anything we can do with this disaster? And here we have a line graph which talks about the concentration of pollutants on the UCIL site, and to the right you can see I listed the pollutants, and I also listed their health outcomes when in exposure, which I think is really important. So we have carpal, which has to do with memory loss and muscle weakness. Aldicarb, classified as the most toxic pesticide. Health effects include dizziness, vomiting, breathing difficulty, and death. We have chlorinated benzene. Nervous system effects. We have HCB, which has to do with photosensitivity and skin irritation. And we have HCH, which is convulsions, nausea, and vomiting. And if we look at the graph, we can see that TCB is found in the highest amounts, and it's also one of the most toxic pollutants and has some long-term health effects if exposed in certain amounts. And digestion of this pollutant is very harmful to humans. We have reached our final slide, which is the summary. To this day, justice does not seem to have been served for the victims and new inhabitants. The site remains with its waste. Bhopal today is still a very dire state with poor air quality and toxic water near the plant site. There's a lot of politics also involved with this entire issue, and I think that plays a role in why there hasn't been immediate help or proper response to the victims near the site. And there's still a lot of campaigns and websites that are trying to promote awareness regarding this issue, which is the best thing they can do right now. We can all do right now, because again, it's still in a very toxic state, and there still needs to be a proper cleanup and just hope for the people that are still living there, because again, it's not a wealthy area, so the residents do need help and support, and voices do need to be heard. And lastly, it's the biggest, I think, lesson here is MIC is a harmful chemical, and it should not be in close proximity to such populated areas. And I think if that was prevented, like, this would not have happened. And of course, along with our safety measures and procedures that we also spoke about. Here are my references. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I hope it was helpful.